"Sir, we've had a complaint. We're going to need you to come with us." The security guard who said it was named Brett Collin, 27 years old, broad through the shoulders, wearing the black polo and khaki slacks of the private security contractor that Dalton University had been using for its events since the previous spring. He was not unkind by nature. He was the kind of young man who believed that rules exist for good reasons, and that applying them consistently is a form of fairness, and he had not yet accumulated enough experience with the world to understand that consistent application of rules to inconsistent situations is not fairness at all, but something else, something that requires a harder word. He was standing in the aisle of the Dalton University arena, which held 4,000 people on its best day, and was holding close to that now, and beside him stood his partner, a guard named Curtis Meade, 31, who was slightly less certain about what they were doing, but had been told to accompany Brett, and so had accompanied him, and was now standing with the expression of a man who is hoping this resolves quickly and cleanly. The man they had approached was 77 years old. His name was Robert Gaines, and he was seated in row 14 of the general seating section, in an aisle seat he had arrived 40 minutes early to secure, which had required him to take the elevator when he arrived at the arena, because his right knee had been rebuilt twice, and stairs of any significant number were a project rather than a transit. He was wearing dark slacks and a blue button-down shirt, and a sport coat he had bought for his younger son's wedding 3 years ago and had worn 4 times since, each time for something that mattered. On his lapel, he wore no decoration. On his wrist, he wore a watch, old, analog, the kind of watch you receive rather than purchase, with a scratched crystal and a worn leather strap, and numerals that glowed faintly in low light. The kind of watch that has been places the person looking at it could not imagine. He was holding a program for the Dalton University School of Engineering graduation ceremony, class of the current year, and his son's name was in it. James Robert Gaines, Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, graduating with distinction. He was not making noise. He was not in anyone's way. He had watched the first 40 minutes of the ceremony with the particular concentrated attention of someone who has organized their day, their week, their drive from Macon, Georgia, around the next 20 minutes when a name would be called and a young man would cross a stage. He looked up at the 2 guards now, with eyes that were pale gray and steady, and that possessed, beneath the surface stillness, the quality of a very deep and very quiet body of water, the kind that doesn't reflect what's above it so much as absorb it. He looked at them with the patience of a man who has waited for things in conditions considerably less comfortable than an arena seat, and he said, "What complaint? A guest in the section has indicated that there's been some disruption." Brett Collins said it the way people say things when they are not fully certain of their own sentence. "We just need to verify your ticket and speak with you briefly outside." "My ticket is valid," Robert said. "I'm sure it is, sir. This is just a routine. My son is graduating today," Robert said. His voice was low and even, a steady low register, unhurried in the way that only people who have learned that urgency is a resource and not a reflex can be unhurried. "He's in the engineering class. James Gaines. He crosses that stage in approximately 15 minutes. Brett looked at his partner. Curtis was looking at the floor with the expression of a man reviewing his life decisions. "Sir, I understand. We'll try to make this as quick as possible. If you'll just..." "Who complained?" A brief pause. "I'm not in a position to share that information." Robert Gaines looked at Brett Collin for a long moment, the look of a man who has been patient and is deciding whether patience has more work left to do here. Then he looked at the stage, where a dean was reading names and graduates were crossing in their caps and gowns in the steady procession that had been going on for 40 minutes and had another 20 to go. He did the arithmetic of the situation. He stood slowly, his right knee negotiating the process in its particular way, and he followed the two guards up the aisle toward the side exit, and as he went, he picked up his program and folded it once and put it in his breast pocket, because he was not leaving it behind. In the row behind where Robert had been sitting, a young woman named Priya Anand had been watching this unfold for the past 90 seconds. She was 24 years old, a Dalton graduate student, seated with her boyfriend's family, and she had been watching not because she was looking for something to observe, but because what was happening in the aisle had the quality of things that make attention involuntary, the specific discomfort of watching something wrong proceed with bureaucratic smoothness. She had noted Robert when he sat down, because he had nodded at her when he passed. And there was something in the nod, in the way he carried himself down the aisle, the particular economy of movement, the quality of attention, that had registered as significant without her being able to say why. She watched him disappear through the side exit with the two guards. She looked at the people around her, who were mostly looking at the stage. She looked at the exit. She made a decision. She leaned to her boyfriend and said she would be back, and she followed. In the corridor outside the arena, Brett Collin was asking Robert Gaines for his ticket and his ID with the resolute purposefulness of someone who is committed to a course of action and is going to see it through on the logic that backing away from it now would cost more than completing it. Robert had produced both. Brett was examining them with the focus of a man who hopes that examination will yield something that justifies what he has already set in motion. It would not. The ticket was valid. The ID was valid. Robert Gaines had purchased his ticket 11 weeks ago, the morning they went on sale, because he had been counting the weeks since James was accepted into the engineering program 3 years ago and was not going to risk a sold-out situation. Priya had followed them into the corridor and was standing 10 feet away, close enough to hear, and she was looking at the lapel of Robert's sport coat, at the absence of decoration there, and at his wrist, at the watch, and she was thinking about the quality of his stillness, and the specific way he had stood when they asked him to, without argument, without performance, without anything except the dignified compliance of someone who has been moving through a world that creates these situations for people like him, and has learned the geometry of it. She stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, to no one in particular, to the situation in general. She had her phone out. "I just want to understand what the complaint was." Brett looked at her. "Ma'am, this is a private conversation." "Sure," she said. "I'm just wondering if there's a specific behavior that's being addressed, because I was sitting directly behind this gentleman for 40 minutes, and he didn't do anything." She looked at Robert. "Were you doing anything?" "I was watching the ceremony," Robert said. "Right." She looked at Brett. "So the complaint was about a person sitting quietly watching a graduation ceremony." The corridor had the acoustic quality of spaces designed for volume management. The sounds from inside the arena were muffled but present. A dean's voice reading names in the steady rhythm of the ceremony, and the sound of it was a clock, and the clock was running, and all three of them could hear it. She stepped slightly to the side and lifted her phone and took a photograph of the two guards and the older man standing between them in the corridor, and she sent it to a number in her contacts, her older brother Marcus, who was at that moment sitting in a restaurant in Savannah, Georgia, who had served 8 years in the United States Navy, who had contacts the way certain people accumulate contacts, like compound interest, each one leading to 3 more, the network branching in directions that are not predictable from the outside. She texted 3 words with the photograph. She texted, "Do you know him?" Marcus Anand looked at the photograph. He looked at the man's face. He looked at the watch on his wrist, the specific watch, the scratched crystal, the worn leather strap, and he sat very still for a moment in the restaurant in Savannah, with his lunch going cold in front of him. Then he made a phone call. The call lasted 40 seconds. The person he called made another call. That call lasted 20 seconds and ended with a location and a time, and the words were already in Atlanta. It had been a Navy reunion weekend, 6 of them, gathered in Atlanta for 3 days. Men who had served together in a unit whose full designation appeared on very few documents that were available to the public. Men who had been in the water and under it, and come up the other side, and had the specific compact quality of people who have been compressed by experience into something denser than their original dimensions. They were in 2 vehicles and 43 minutes from Dalton University when the call came through. They were at Dalton University in 38 minutes. Because the man driving the lead vehicle had a particular relationship with speed limits that his service record contextualized, but did not excuse, they arrived in the corridor outside the arena 7 minutes before James Robert Gaines was scheduled to cross the stage. 6 men. They were wearing civilian clothes, jeans, jackets, nothing that announced anything. They were between 34 and 51 years old. The oldest among them, a man named Chief Petty Officer Thomas Reardon, retired, walked slightly ahead, and he moved through the corridor with the specific quality of a man for whom space is a tactical variable rather than a social one. He stopped in front of Robert Gaines, and he looked at him, and he said, "Chief." Robert looked at him for a moment. Recognition worked across his face slowly, the way it does when years are being crossed. "Tommy," he said. "We heard you were having a graduation," Reardon said. "We thought we'd come." Brett Collin had stopped examining the ticket. He and Curtis Meade were both standing in the corridor, looking at the 6 men who had appeared with the quality of things that do not require explanation, in the way that weather does not require explanation. Chief Reardon turned to the 2 guards. He did not do it with aggression. He did it with the same quality of compressed patience that Robert Gaines had been demonstrating for the past 15 minutes, and he said, "This man is Robert Gaines. He served in the United States Navy SEAL teams for 21 years. He was my commanding officer for 3 of those years, at a time and in places that I am not going to describe to you in a corridor, but that I will tell you shaped every significant decision I have made in the 20 years since." He paused. He was not raising his voice. He was using it the way a precise instrument is used. He is here to watch his son graduate. He has a valid ticket. He has not done anything wrong, and whatever complaint was lodged against him will need to find another mechanism for resolution, because this man is going back inside. Meade had already decided. He had decided approximately 30 seconds into the arrival of 6 men in civilian clothes who moved the way these men moved. He stepped aside. Brett Collin held for a moment longer, the last reflex of commitment to a position that the position no longer merited. And then he, too, stepped aside. And something in him, some small architectural certainty, quietly revised itself. The arena doors opened. The 6 men formed a loose corridor of their own, and Robert Gaines walked through it and back into the arena. And the dean at the microphone was 4 names away from James Robert Gaines when Robert reached his aisle and turned in and took his seat. And the 6 men filed into the row behind him and sat down with the collective quiet competence of people who have executed more complex entries in more challenging conditions and found this one unremarkable. Priya sat back down beside her boyfriend. She watched the stage. The dean said the name. James Robert Gaines, Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, graduating with distinction. James crossed the stage. He accepted his diploma. He shook the dean's hand. He turned to find his father in the crowd the way graduates turn, with a specific searching quality of someone who needs to locate one face in 4,000 to make the moment complete. He found it. Row 14, aisle seat. He raised his diploma. His father raised one hand, a single small gesture, not theatrical, not anything beyond what it was. One man telling another across a large room that he saw him, that he was there, that the thing that had been worked toward had been completed, and that the completion was witnessed. That was the moment. Not the guards. Not the corridor. Not the 6 men in the row behind who had driven 40 minutes through a Saturday morning. That moment, hand raised, diploma raised, was the whole story, and everything else had simply been the obstacle course between the drive from Macon and the thing that had always been going to happen. Outside afterward, in the sunlight on the Dalton University quad, James Gaines shook hands with each of the 6 men from his father's row, and did not know any of their names until Chief Reardon introduced himself. And then James looked at his father with an expression that required no translation, and Robert looked back with the expression of a father who has watched his child grow into something good, and is very tired, and very satisfied, and would like to find somewhere to sit. They found a bench. The 6 men drifted away to give them space, with the tactful instinct of people who understand what other people need without requiring instruction. The sun was bright, and the November air was cold, and the campus was loud with the particular noise of 4,000 people and their families doing what people do when something has been completed, and the celebrating of the completion has become the day's primary activity. Brett Cullen walked across the quad in the mid-afternoon when his shift ended, and found Robert Gaines still on the bench, his son beside him, the diploma box between them, and he stopped and he said, "Mr. Gaines, I owe you an apology." Robert looked up at him. "I didn't know who you were," Brett said. "But I should have understood that it didn't matter. I applied a complaint without asking whether the complaint was legitimate, and I took you away from your son's ceremony for 7 minutes, and I am sorry for that." Robert was quiet for a moment. He looked at his son, who was looking at his shoes with the expression of someone deciding whether to speak. He looked back at Brett. 7 minutes, he said. "I've waited longer than that for things that didn't turn out as well as today." He looked out at the quad. "You did what you thought the job required. Sometimes the job is written wider than the situation calls for. Now you know where the line is." He extended his hand. Brett shook it. He walked away across the quad, and Robert watched him go, and then looked at his son, who was still looking at his shoes and smiling in the way of young men who are moved by things and are still deciding whether to say so. 6 SEALs at your graduation," James said. "Apparently," Robert said. "Did you know they were coming?" "No. Do things like that happen to you a lot?" Robert Gaines looked at the diploma box between them on the bench. He thought about the drive from Macon. He thought about the elevator, and the aisle seat he had arrived 40 minutes early to claim, and the program folded in his breast pocket with his son's name in it. He thought about 21 years in the water and under it and the men he had been in it with, and the specific quality of a loyalty that does not announce itself until the moment that announcement is required. "Only when it counts," he said. "There are men who show up to the things that matter with nothing to prove and no expectation of recognition, carrying in their breast pockets nothing but a program with a name in it and a ticket they bought 11 weeks in advance. The world does not always make it easy for them. Sometimes it puts 2 guards in the aisle and a complaint with no name attached. And sometimes, because of the specific and unannounced loyalty of the people who were once beside them in the water, it corrects itself in time. If you were moved by Robert Gaines's story of quiet love and unwavering presence, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to Veterans Valor for for more stories of America's unassuming heroes.